Uncle Frank was a pretty chill guy. Always had shades on, cracked jokes, and brought life to the family events. He was my favorite person out of all. The thing is, though, no one in our age knew what was behind those shades. Every time I'd ask my mom, she'd shrug it off. I'd ask my dad or any other grown-ups, they'll just brush past it. My naive self didn't think I should ask the man himself until I found myself with him at a picnic table during one of our family events. So, Unc Frank, I was hesitant at first. He chuckled. Spit it out, Gumball, what is it? He took a swig of his beer and adjusted his shades. I took a couple of deep breaths. Why do you always have shades on? Ever since I was a kid, I haven't seen him without them. I don't know. Maybe I have sensitive eyes, he chuckled. But he could tell I wasn't amused. Don't bullshit me. I spoke without thought. Language, Missy. He barked at me and smiled. Placing his firm hand under my seat, he pulled my chair closer to him until we were eye to eye. You want to know? I'll tell you. Years ago, when I was around my teens, probably 18 or 19, a wee older than you, strange things started happening. We had no internet access at the tip of our fingers, so news traveled mostly by paper or mouth to mouth, so we weren't aware of what was happening around us. The moon was full. I could see my shadow at night. I had just came from Charlie's place, was playing video games, and I lost track of time, I guess. This was before everything you know now. The neighborhood we lived in was quiet, just peaceful. So there I am, walking, daydreaming. In order for me to get to our house, I'd either have to pass a clearing, a big baseball field-sized clearing, or I'd have to go around. Seeing that I was pressed for time, I decided to take the shortcut and pass through the clearing. My surroundings went from crickets chirping to dead silence. I could only hear the crunching of my feet. And marching, just before me, something like 10 feet or so away, stood a crowd of like 16 or so people side to side. Men and women, different shapes and sizes. The alarm bells in my head rang. It didn't feel right. When I looked up at them, the marching ceased. They turned to face me in unison. I couldn't see their eyes, but I remember their mouths hung open, chins reaching the collarbone as if the jaws were dislocated. I could feel a lump in my throat build up. Every instinct in my body told me to run, to go back, heck, to get away. But you know boys, and thinking they can take on whatever. I walked forward. Just behind that horde was Salvation, my street. The moment I reached where they stood, they cocked their heads to the side. For a moment, I saw their eyes. Nothing but slits of red. Bones elongated. I could hear bones cracking as their limbs expanded the fingers, bony, pointy. They let out a loud shriek that pierced my ears. The air shifted, became non-existent. I turned tail and ran. I ran and ran, followed by their animalistic screams, the ground rumbling at the horde as it chased me. The adrenaline surged through my veins and I kept running. I crashed into Charlie's door screaming like a maniac, and then it was all a blur. Uncle Frank takes another swig. I try to open my mouth to ask something before he raises a finger to shush me. Next morning, I wake up, try to recollect the events of last night to Charlie, but he wasn't having any of it, so I headed home. The walk was longer than usual. The fear still lingered in my heart. I passed by the clearing. Sure enough, footprints were there. Dozens, if not more of them. At my peripheral, I could see the group of people. The horde. I nearly jumped out of my skin. They seemed far, and when I turned to look, it was nowhere to be found. Days passed, and the horde got closer and closer. It plagued my very existence. It went from being on my peripheral to being in my front view, and no one could see it but me. Since the horde was in front of me, I could see it clearly. Grotesque features. Mouths turning into maws. Flesh hanging from bone. I could smell them. Entrails hanging out, their eyes sunken nearly inside their skulls. You're probably wondering why I didn't tell your mom or anyone. Well, it's because she had exams, and Dad was a dick about school and having academically smart, successful kids. I started losing sleep, hardly eating. The horde advanced. I'd see it among the crowds, in school, in the freaking TV. Heck, I couldn't do alone stuff without them being there, staring, hungry, and coming at me. Then I noticed something. The more I blinked, it's like the horde would teleport, but if I kept my eyes open, it'll stay in place, no movement. Then I started keeping my eyes open, researching about them while I kept them at bay. But you can only hold out for so long. Eventually, you'll tire. I dozed off at a park. Sounds of the ground rumbling, gnawing, and gnashing of teeth woke me up. The horde was onto me, lunging at me from the air. I held my eyes open. They just froze there. I could feel my heart thump and thump and thump till my ribcage hurt because it was about to burst from my chest. I'd look away for a moment without blinking, and it'll just appear in front of me, still feet away from where it was located. See, the horde needed to somehow teleport without being seen. So I made it my priority to always see it when it's coming. Uncle Frank grabbed his glasses and took them off. I almost fell on my back, but he held the chair in place. I didn't know I was holding my breath until I was gasping for air. My palms were sweaty. The reason he always had his shades on was because he had no eyelids. You did that? He looked me in the eyes. Yes. It was the only way to stay alive. He put his shades back on and took another sip of his beer. There was a moment of silence between us. I took that as an invitation to ask him questions. The horde, what happened to it? He turned his head to my left, staring at something not too keen to be seen by the naked eye, and turned back to me. It's still there, forever waiting, hoping to take a bite out of me. He stood up and took off his shirt to show me his back. There were claw marks, different sizes, some from kids, others from grown-ups, scratches and teeth marks. He covered it back up again. This is from the time I slipped up. In order for me to live, I had to do what I did. You see, I did my research years later. Turns out, I'm not the first nor the last person to see the horde. A family of 4 was found mauled to death. They said it was an animal attack, but the teeth marks were human, and there were too many. The family had called the cops before, reporting about being followed or stalked by a group of weirdos, only for them to end up dead in a locked apartment. I swallowed the lump that had risen inside my throat and took a deep breath. I thanked him for the story before my mom walked in on us. What I haven't told you, or told any of them, is that I've been seeing the horde too, at the corner of my eye. And with every blink, it gets closer.